see privacy as a competitive advantage, see privacy as a challenge that you want to tinker and solve, a complex technical problem that you need to solve to do cool stuff and be loyal to your user.
So there's 7 billion people. So yes, why not 7 billion policies for individuals which companies could subscribe for when they're engaging this individual? It's my pleasure and honor to have you, Katitza, in our Expert Insight series.
Thank you so much for the kind invitation. I love to be here and share and learn from you and share my knowledge about privacy issues. Really want to learn more about what's going on in Asia and in Singapore and exchange opinions and discussions with you.
Wonderful. And Katitza, as we were discussing earlier, this whole emerging technologies of IoT, digital transformation, and pretty much all things connected, as our company name also says, system to systems, human to systems, whether consumer product or B2B, there are a lot of data exchange. While we say the data is the new oil, but at the same time, we need to be careful of what we're doing with the data. And privacy is such a complex topic, right? What it means for you, what it means for me, what it means for somebody else, for the same service and same solution may vary. So the challenge which I see personally, while we keep clicking yes, 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 and accept a lot of terms and conditions from different application, different services, how do we define privacy? So is there clear definition of privacy that we can agree upon and then everybody can use on what? How would you define privacy, especially in this digital connected world? What are your thoughts on the privacy as a definition?
Well, I agree with you. Everything we do these days generates data, whether it's our device, our computer, or whether it's our own homes, our televisions, the subway, the payment system, the cars, the cities, everything generates data about us. And this data can be used for a better world, to bring us amazing products, for a better, cleaner, more sustainable cities, for a safe place. But the opposite can also be true. If our data and the combination of our data over time could be used against us to limit our choices, to use because of all the information you gather about us and all the knowledge you know about myself, my behavior, with whom I communicate with, for how long, what I like, what I don't like, what I stir to someone. Or even you can, over time, and depending of the algorithms and the things you use, reveal my personality traits, my emotions, or even weakness in people's personality. And so all this data is very valuable and can be used for the good, for, as I said, all these amazing products that we like to see. But also can be used against you to limit your choices, to limit opportunities, or to convince you to do things that you maybe don't want to do it, or you're not able to see it or resist, because it's exploring some of the vulnerabilities that have been revealed by analyzing your data. So when I try to define privacy, first I want to explain a case where illustrate what I just said, and you also mentioned it. So I choose a case in Japan, just because we were in Asia, which, different countries and different regions have different perception of the concept of privacy. Not as a right, because a right is universal, but some people, for instance, in the United States, there is a distrust against the government. There are rules very strong about government access to the data. In Latin America, maybe we don't trust both the government and the company. In Japan, there is this concept of goodwill. And there are different countries, like in the European Union also, they don't trust, foreign companies, also or American companies. And there is always this trust issue in country to country. But I think it doesn't matter about the cultural difference. I think when it comes to use your data against you, people kind of understand at that moment what privacy means. So I have this case in Japan where this is a very famous or well-known job seeker platform, Rikunabi, when all graduate students go there to search for jobs. So in this case, the company who runs this operation was using a third-party cookie to track their users' behavior and develop an algorithm score that will assess if the user or if the grad student will decline or not a job offer, or if we withdraw later if they get a job offer. This is a big issue in Japan because there is this culture of the full-time life employment,
Right.
when people are hired since they are very young and they stay in the job forever, something that in the US is not like that. And so they start being very concerned because many people were being honest. It's like they register with their name, they put their bio, and they were saying, oh, I prefer to work in the government rather than the company. And if this score will profile them in a way that will diminish their choices of getting job offers, they will be like, they really were scared, and there were a lot of public outrage in the country. And of course, this was done. There were two schemes. In the first one, they used cookies, to be able to track the users. But to bypass the data protection law in the country created like a corporate scheme. So in a way, because the law changing country by country, but I don't want to go into too details here because it's too long and I will alleviate it. The issue was that they didn't ask for consent. But later, they even asked for consent, but they never told the students that they are using their data to train this algorithm who will score them later, and they sold this algorithm to the companies, the potential employees. At Honda, Toyota, all the big companies in Japan. And so, yeah, I was honest saying I prefer enter into a government than a company, but honestly, you're assessing in the moment, your offers and your choices. And they didn't want to limit their options, And so this is very sensitive because we want good products. And I personally have no problem disclosing my data if I know it will be used for my benefit. But if you're using my data to sell it to someone and use my data against me to limit my freedom and my choices, that could affect my whole professional life career, that's a no. And I think that it's getting very complicated because the law has been always behind and technology has been always very quick, that there is not a clear understanding. I'm coming back to your original point. What is privacy, or why we have to see like the development of technology and process with privacy in mind, seeing privacy as a competitive advantage, laws to guide me in my development process, not so much as a compliance tool to see how I can, do this so I don't comply with the requirement. I think the spirit of the law, the spirit of the privacy laws is to guide you in your development of your process. So you don't end up having this unethical or negative consequence in the user through all the development of the process. And I think that's a very important message. So for me, privacy, just coming back to this, is my right to control my own personal data and be informed of what you are going to do with that. I make sure that you treat my data in a fair way, so you don't use the data against me in a way that will affect my life, my choices, or that you will know so much about my mental health or my professional or my emotional vulnerabilities or whatever to convince me to do something I really can't resist or I cannot even see. So I think there's a gray line when I think things are getting more complicated because of this interconnection that you mentioned. And it's just really complicated. Yeah.
Correct. No, like you said rightly, that data privacy, for me, I might be okay to share certain data. And so you are maybe and my family, for example. But as far as the data is not being used to limit my choices, or to use against my options, or my whether personal or professionals, is something privacy should be defined as. So I'm not sure how it could be written as a single rule. For example, if somebody is using Facebook with a billion users, so there could be billion definition of privacy and the billion terms and condition for everybody to accept their own terms and condition, and choose to use the platform or not. But at the same time, it is getting even more complex, not just one system, because once the systems or the solutions capture the data, obviously they exchange the data with third party as well. So if you map this whole digital ecosystem, there are few stakeholders, if I can name, like there are solutions seekers who are looking for solutions. It could be individuals like you and me, or it could be corporate who want to build their smart factory or smart building, for example. And then there are solution providers, for example, telcos or platform providers or device providers, and so on and so forth. So if I, and then obviously the larger government agencies, which we'll also talk about. So to help these stakeholders, let's take a couple of questions on those. So from solutions provider side of it, let's say first provider side of it, who are building fancy products and the solutions. And as we know, the power of data multiplies as the multiple system talk to each other, right? So take example of a smart building. I was talking to one of the solution providers, large company. We could talk about digital spaces, right? So imagine this a digital space, which is could be a commercial building or office complex. They want to make the experience for the user seamless. So they might be using face recognition, for example, to do access control. The moment I walk into the door opens or the turnstile open by face recognition to let me go inside. And the same time, this access control system at the gate is also now connected to the lift system, which will tell me that, okay, CK actually works at level 12, not at level 11. So let him go on level lift B, which take him to level 12, right? And then this system also is connected to my own office, which is automatically managed with this HVAC system for lighting, for air con and everything. And then maybe using another automatic uh, car plate system at the car parking system, so that I don't have to kind of do any manual work. So as a use case, it may sound very interesting that, okay, for me it is very seamless and convenient that I don't have to do anything. Things are automatically happening, right? But these integrated system, who will be responsible? Who will be responsible for the privacy policy? Is it a lift guy? Is it car parking guys? Is it HVAC guys? So is there any kind of guidelines or reference point that, okay, when multiple parties, multiple systems come together, somebody have to take ownership, somebody have to lead this privacy topic, so that we know as a user, if at the end of the day ask, hey, how are you using it, my data? There have to be some clear answer. Any
So
suggestion on that?
I will have to ask a couple of questions to understand better just what you're
Right.
talking, because it's always complicated to analyze cases out of the blue without the facts. Are you
Right.
saying, is there any company who is responsible for all the processing of the data, or all the companies are acting in equal footing and they are interoperating?
Okay, that's interesting. So obviously there will be a company who will integrate with multiple systems
Okay.
to build better intelligence for monitoring and control. But at the same time, for to make it happen, they've got to share the data. So they may not be as involved in processing the data except their own system, but they do got to exchange the data to do monitoring and control.
Okay, so it's kind of like a third party tracking, like one
Right.
company. I'm repeating to see whether we are on the same page and I'm understanding what you're saying. So what you're saying is there will be one company who will probably give them a SDK or something that will allow that company to collect the data from different companies,
Right.
to train an algorithm or something to develop
Right.
something. Is that
Right.
so it all depends about the users, the user, and the parties. I cannot talk about any concrete case, but in general, I have a relationship with the company and I give them my data to that company, but I'm not giving the data to the other company. So
Right.
if you are going to do that, you have to be very clear why you are doing that and for which purpose and how you are going to use my data, and are you going to use the data back to me? Because imagine, okay, I share my data, maybe you anonymize it and pseudonymize it and send it to others, but then you send me back. Then you use that algorithm on whatever scores you develop about me, and then use it back about me. So you identify that thing that was anonymous back to me, in which you are using my data again on me. And I need to know whether all that process is something for my benefit or not. Like, I have to be informed, I have to be clear, I have to be like, are you doing, if this is a big issue which involves like a lot of sensitive information, like, are you talking about like my eyes, are you talking biometrics, my mental health, medical records? Depend of the data, you will have certain obligations to ensure that, you have to do audits, accountability, and you make sure that the processing is right. But if it's the third country, the third company who is collecting all this data from other companies, and that third country, third company has no relationship with the user, that's a sketchy. That's really problematic, and it's happening a lot. I mean, I'm not going to be unrealistic. It's happening with simple cookies, so it's happening. So it gets really problematic in terms of why, like the third party tracking and the third party collection of data, because I don't know the purpose, I don't know how you will use it, I don't know if it will be good or not. So it's problematic, it's dark. I don't think it's accordance to the spirit of data protection. Regardless of compliance, one message I want to get to all the engineers everywhere is that when you're developing a product, I want you to see privacy as a competitive advantage, as a way of saying, oh, I can do this cool thing and still it's good for the user. And so how do I do this? What are the audits or the accountability measures I need to embed it in the development process? Because it's a start even with just the pipeline, or even your roadmap. To have in all moment consider this, because there are always two ways of doing things. You can develop this way, you can develop this way, or there are many. So you will have to make choices for that. So in this scheme that you are talking, I see it very problematic, and it's very problematic in the context of Internet of Things, because many of these interconnections companies, they didn't necessarily were companies that start thinking on privacy by default or by design. Sometimes there were just like companies selling the fridge or TVs, and then now they have internet and the TVs. So they didn't have this problem with privacy before, as they now will have it. And so there is no the security is not as strong, and they are sharing a lot of data. And so I think that if you are going to do this, you have to plan very well how to do it, and do it in a way that will be honest with the user, transparent. I want the cool stuff, just tell me. I just don't want to keep pointing out how all we're doing is actually harming. It's not every company, it's not all the time, but it's a problem. And I think that before there were no cases, so it sounds like the GDPR or the data protection law were like, oh, complicated. Wow, so difficult, because it's like coding. Like you code with a code, or you code the law,
Right.
and so it's never easy. And so, privacy law put road make things complicated, but engineers are super smart. They always tinker and trying to solve complex issues, so they can see privacy as another complex issue that they can do embedded in the process. So yeah, I don't think I have a concrete answer beyond that. I think that cannot be this third party collection of data is shady, it's outside, it's not transparent, it's not clear to the user. The user not even know the name of that company,
Exactly.
So yeah,
Yep.
and
Yep.
so it's really, really a concern.
Correct. So, interesting to hear your views. At the same time, I was also kind of visualizing as a user as well as a technology providers. So, if you take the same use case of smart buildings, then there are solutions providers who are putting all these smart solutions in the smart building, but then there is the real estate owner who is actually subscribing for the solutions for their users. It could be a shopping mall, it could be an office complex to upsell their real estate. Because at the end of the day, real estate is basically to sell per square feet or per square meter. So for them to add value to their tenants or the guest, they want to use the smart technologies. So at the same time, from the solution seeker side of it, they also kind of find it very complex many times that okay, I have engaged this large system integrator who is actually putting all these multiple technologies in place, which could be again provided by third parties. So I'm envisioning there could be some new kind of contract laws which need to be introduced to address these terms and condition, and even the real estate owner should be responsible to mediate these kind of conversion, and rather than just putting this responsibility on the individual user, because like you said, individual user may not know who is the technology providers and what technology is out there. He just getting a good experience, whether it is a shopping mall or an office complex. So any quick guidelines on these solution seekers, how they should kind of help evaluating the solutions. If somebody's selling them AI solutions, somebody's selling this wonderful technology piece of it, are there like top 5, 10 questions they should be asking them about
Yeah,
privacy to know that
yeah.
okay, they are actually doing privacy by design, they're taking care of it instead of just throwing them some fancy AI or AR/VR solution.
Yeah, I will say, which data are you collecting about me? For how long are you storing it?
Mhm.
Are you sharing this with someone, with third parties, subcontractors, or other companies? Why you are collecting the data in the first place? You have to explain me why you need it. And if you don't need it for something I want, maybe you shouldn't collect it. And there are laws that already tell you that. It's also changed country by country. Singapore have a data protection law, but it's different from the GDPR. I haven't analyzed it. But it already told you. I don't think we need new laws. What we need is to enforce the law. Well, depend on the country. I don't know about Singapore, but I will say, yeah, these questions, what data are collecting and why you're collecting it, for which purpose. Do you need it? And do you need all that information, or you just need a little bit? And if they are collecting a lot more, why you need all of that? Can you achieve that purpose with just this type of data? You know, how long are you storing it? Do you delete it after a period of time? And do you share the data with someone? And are you going to tell me if you do so?
Mm,
Um, yeah, I think that's our basic questions,
true.
And if you're going, yeah, and I think that that kind of transparency is very hard because companies are not really telling you what they are doing. It's when you analyze the privacy policies, they are very vague. I understand because they are technical documents, but they can tell you, are you using we are going to use this data to build a score that we will sell to the potential employer that will maybe hire you or not based on the score. that we did about you. Do you
Right.
think the user will say yes? No, but we don't have that questions,
Mm.
And I think that they are not complying with the law, in my opinion. But they are not being honest because I'm sure that if I tell them, like I just told you very directly, the user will say in Japan, no, 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 I don't want that. At the same time, like users want to trust in the technology. I want to be honest. I want to say what I want, but I don't want this to be against me. So what your company are going to do to implement that, the device is secure. They are not going to data breaches. And another question on the list of questions. Um, yeah, and so I think you also mentioned AR/VR.
Yep. Yep. Exactly. So
Yeah,
we'll talk about those emerging technologies because AR/VR is while it is a bit infancy and technology development is happening, but once the technology is ready in terms of commercial and the compute and the power, it is going to change a lot of ways, the way we experience, whether it's lifestyle or even in the industries, like you might be seeing the use cases about remote maintenance and all those sort of things. So any thoughts on particularly AR, VR technologies?
yeah, I love the technology. I love VR, and I'm sure I will like AR. Some of them. I also understand that for some of the headsets to work, will require to collect our body data. So, for instance, if I
Correct.
want to use the headsets and I want to play a game, I will have the hand tracking, but instead of using the hardware, I will just my hands to interact with the experience, and that's great. And to calibrate the device, you will just measure my eyes and the movement of my eyes on what you stare at. And then they're having a lot of research about about how the use of the device or how you play in your experience can reveal if you have a mental health,
Correct.
anxiety, depression, ADHD, just for the way they interact with the device, and it's fascinating, but at the same it's scary. I just want there to play my device, to
Right.
play, to do my export, to be play with lifesaver, the lightsaber, to play with Vader Immortal or see the Star Wars. I didn't know you're collecting also about my all this other information, and I think it has to be clear if you are doing that and for which purpose. If you are going to use the data to target me ads, that might be very sensitive. I don't know until point you can use all these. So there is one issue. Let's brainstorm because here is we are discussing. For one hand, we have all this data. Some of them we need it for the purpose, but you don't need to share it with everyone. You can store it in the device. But then your device will be so intelligent, and maybe like your iPhone and your Apple device, it already have a lot of information about you, and the AI is processing your device, so it's not spread everywhere. And that sounds great too, but the problem is, on one hand, that it will have such much detail about you, which is called this egocentric collection of your data, that I think is much more than they already have. Maybe companies like Google, Facebook, Twitter, they already have that information about you, but
Right.
other companies don't. And I think that it's just going to be so sensitive about too much about your life and who you are as a person, that if you use that to profile me, to give me a score, and put me in certain attributes of categories to make me do something against my will because I won't know, that's like a red line. So
Right.
I think that we need to start thinking about what are the issues when you are developing your AI that can have a negative consequence in the user. And
Mm.
the companies need to start thinking when they're doing that, the type of data, the input that they are putting to train their algorithms, and the output, and do audits to make sure that they don't have negative consequence, and as another question, I will do the company. It depends on the processing of the data, but we are talking ARVR here. So back to this point, I think that it's delicate, complicated. I don't think we in EFF, we are discussing these issues right now, storing the device, the cloud. Yeah, we want all in device, and I think that's great if it's possible in the majority of cases, but are you going to use that data also over time, everything about me, and then use that to target ads? That's get tricky, the targeting of ads, because of this personal mental health information about you that the collection of this data can infer. It's the inference of the body data that it's problematic. So
And
yeah.
I think there's even research also, if you have to value the data, certain type of the data, while the financial data is like among the top, but healthcare data comes even higher than that, is the most critical data in terms of the value, uh, in a sense. So
I will say,
yeah,
I think I want to build about that because you touched something very interesting. Yeah, I think that health data is very important. Biometric of body data is also very important, but it's not only about how valuable it is, it's about how to make sure that whatever you're going to do is fair and not going to have a negative consequence on me, Because if you start revealing all this very sensitive data, and people start building scores like in Japan, that, or in that, once your data is out, there's no way to recover. And when you are profiled, there's no way to clean it. So I think that we need to be conscious when we are doing this, that how we are going to use it and store it, and if we are sharing for which purpose. And if it's in the device, we may be okay for some purposes, but not for others, and maybe we need to start asking as developers too, the developers and not only the lawyers or the policy people, what kind of data or what kind of use of the data could be actually a red line, what we shouldn't do. That it will be like, for ethical reasons, you shouldn't cross, and I think that's something they have to have clear in their pipeline.
Right. And while you have been like speaking to many agencies, I think, as well as I'm sure with a lot of technology companies, while the technology is creating this kind of challenges for privacy, but maybe the technology has an answer also for this, right? So one thing which I was kind of thinking aloud, like we have pay-per use kind of model, right? So whether is a Uber, whether is a electronic scooter, we just pay, we use, and then we disconnect their services from them. So similarly, while GDPR and all these privacy policies are in place, but GDPR has been there for almost 2.5 years, and companies has found a workaround by introducing new cookies and new policies, which still nobody reads and kind of keep on accepting it. So from the technology point of view, have you kind of come across or such initiative where we could also change the way how the data is collected at the times? Okay, if I'm just, let's say, take example of this platform. So I might have accepted some privacy policies on this platform, but I'm just using this platform for this particular interview. So during that period, what data is being exchanged is okay, but don't introduce a cookie in my browser permanently to keep track and keep giving me some advertisement post my consumption of your service. So any thoughts or anything such have you seen?
I think that you're right, and this is very important when it comes to the AR/VR. Just to make it more concrete, you can use the games and the hand tracking, but you don't need to store the data. You just need it for the experience, and it will be the same case as you say. Pay as the you have it by in the moment, but then I don't know the privacy policy, so I don't know if that your case are really like that. But what I'm trying to say is that you sometimes don't need to collect this data, and so I may need it in the moment, but then I don't need to store it. I can rewrite it every night or every day or after, I stop using it. So I think that that's very important to take into account. I would like to see more companies being more clear about that, yeah.
Sure. And as your role, you also look into the international data
But
sharing collaboration.
I would like to ask you a question back. So,
Okay, sure.
it's true that GDPR it has been not as effective as I would like it, but I think the problem is more enforcement rather than the GDPR. I think that even if you, because companies see GDPR as a compliance tool instead of like use the GDPR as a way of guide the policy development process or the product development process inside your company and comply with the spirit of the law, later the compliance and get compliance too, you check, but it will have, I think, different way of doing things. And I think that if you are trying to comply with the spirit of the GDPR, you wouldn't do some of these workarounds. I mean, the case in Japan, I love it because it really go on the schemes of how they try to circumvent the law. They create companies because they said that, like one of the things is, well, the concept of personal data or cookies personal data only when you can easily link the data with another data. But so there is a discussion what easy linking means. Some discussion if you have to go to another company to cross-link the information, so that is not easy linking. And so they create a scheme of companies so that they share certain data, so they didn't have to ask for consent to the user. Then they receive an administrative fine by the data protection authority in that country, and then they create a second scheme when they ask for consent, to do exactly the same. But they didn't tell the users directly, as I tell you, we are using your data to build this score that we will sell to the potential employers to whatever purpose, because they didn't say the purpose, and they didn't do that, but that's also like short, and it's a problem of communication, a problem of practices. But there is a third thing that is beyond even these obligations, which is I should have the right to not be subject to automatic decision making that will have a negative impact in my life. And I should have to be able to withdraw. I should be able to not to be. I want to be left alone. I don't want to be targeted. So I see your point about the GDPR and the workarounds, but I think but it's not a problem of necessarily of the GDPR. I think it's also a problem of the companies and how they see the GDPR. Yeah. And then finally, I said, I think that some of the solutions that you mentioned just use the data for the moment and not cookies. Create a live log of your life, like recording everything you do online, might be an option. But I don't. I all for that, especially in AR/VR when you don't need that kind of data. I'm just worried that I love the technology, but I also worry that to make the technology to work, they require a lot of your bad information collected from the user's point of view. This interaction. You stay longer in a product and you move to another product. In the future, you will stare to something to click and move, but they could also track, what I like or what I'm looking for how long, and deduce more in a more granular way than ever before, exactly what I want, what I like, how I like it, and even the unconscious reactions that I cannot control because the way I blink are unconscious. And so I think, and then use that to target you with ads, I see it very problematic. Yeah. I don't have a solution on that. This is still a conversation we're having, and we're brainstorming about different solutions. But I don't think right now we have like a unique answer. But we're working on that. Yeah.
Yeah. I think, like you said, sometime enforcement also helps. I mean, take example Singapore. While we are good at certain thing because certain policies, certain regulations has been enforced to the companies, to the individual to follow the rule, follow the law. So sometimes kind of a pat on the hand or maybe something even stronger would help in a way to adopt such policies and regulations. So another follow-up question on the similar note is uh, there are countries like US, Europe, Singapore who are proactive in nature to understand the consequences, understand the complexity. But then there are like hundreds of countries, developing countries, maybe some of the African countries, some of the other countries who are yet have to start discussion on that. And by the time the technologies they wake up to talk about it, technology is already there. So as we speak about Africa is like a new China. There's a lot of technology development is happening in Africa, but I'm not sure they may not be ready for this discussion. So how these countries across the borders can leverage from each other to learn about it? Why would one country versus other will collaborate on this topic? And any thoughts on that? How countries and collaborating on this sensitive topic?
Yeah. Are you talking about law enforcement, or are you talking about data privacy, like
Data
consumer?
privacy, to
Ah,
be
okay.
precise. Yeah.
Okay. So yeah. So the GDPR have cross-border access rules in theory. So it's a law, it's a country outside the European Union developed, like Japan, they have developed a data protection law, and they have a mutual recognition between Japan and the European Union that their laws provide essential equivalent level of privacy protection, which means that Japan law and the EU are not the same, but they provide essential equivalent of protection, so they can share freely between them because they both will, in theory, protect it. There is a huge litigation right now because the United States was subject to have a safe harbor, then a privacy shield, like a decision that they can transfer the data between certain companies and the EU. One caveat: there is, in addition to this adequacy decision, like Japan and the United States and the European Union, there are other mechanisms to transfer the data. Standard contracted clauses, etc. But recently, the court in the EU has said that in the Trump case, when assessing the adequacy of a country, we need to assess also, the country's laws for government access to data, and also access to legal remedies and data protection authorities, and a series of requirements. And so in the case in the United States, it says, the United States has certain laws that are not meet the standard of the EU, which means that if the data of Europeans go to the US, they won't provide the essential equivalent level of privacy protection. And so that's why it's all the debate, right? But the idea is to be able to have that adequacy so the data can freely cross in terms of be able to collaborate across countries. And I think there are more than 100 countries with data protection laws. Many have different models. There are, in addition to the EU model, there is also the Asia Pacific Economic Forum, binding corporate rules, and some other rules that they have for cross-border access to data. I think that this just makes the thing even more complicated in terms of privacy protections, So I think it needs to happen. We have like the call centers, going from Europe or Latin America to India or Latin America countries. There are always going to be transfer of personal data. What we need to make sure is that the transfer is protected. So if the company comply with the essence of the law, even if their country doesn't have one, that would be great. But of course, as you said, we need enforcement because companies find workarounds and that's not good. They don't fear that they will be caught, and so they just do what they want to do. And because I think it's not on purpose, I think it's just lack of knowledge sometimes, or lack of,
Right.
of knowing that this was going to cause this problem. I think we need to educate everyone on, in complying with the spirit of the law for the development of a product since the start through all the ecosystem. And that the chip needs to change.
Right.
In addition to enforcement, of course.
Correct. Yeah, that's interesting. So we're almost coming to the end of this conversation. While this can go very long, but for this session, uh, last question which I will combine: if you have to advise or mentor a startup who is building up some fancy technology, what will be your advice to them? And second follow-up question is, how can we from Southeast Asia ecosystem can collaborate with EFF, and if any work EFF is doing in this region?
Okay, so for the startup community, I think I have been telling it through the whole interview. See privacy as a competitive advantage, see privacy as a challenge that you want to tinker and solve, a complex technical problem that you need to solve to do cool stuff and be loyal to your user. And so that's the issue. Be clear with the user. Make sure that what you're going to do won't go against them, won't hurt them, or harm them. And I think that that's the message. And this I know that lawyers and technologies, there always have tensions there, but I think that when you do policy for developing a product, you can be good friends, because lawyers or policy people are trying to tinker with the law too, as they tinker with the code engineers. And so to tinker in a way that try to protect privacy. And so if you have that, the debates will be super fun, and you push back, but it's like, well, we are building together this cool stuff that will be strong on privacy. We are always open to collaborate. We go speak in conferences in different parts of the world, also in Asia, and sometimes there are some laws. We send comments about it when relevant. So we are open to explore, especially in the context of AR, VR. I'm really interested to be able to, have more nuanced conversations about, the challenges in the region, what we can do to brainstorm together on the issue. I personally love the technology. I hope it succeeds, but at the same time, I want to make sure, doesn't become like a draconian surveillance tool. So let's try to make a better world with technology.
Wonderful. That's a very nice closing remark. And it was wonderful speaking with you, Katitza. And as you said, this is a complex topic. We do need to have a discussion among different stakeholders, the technologists, the lawyers, the policymakers, the individuals who may not even understand this, but we do need to bring them also in the conversation somehow to hear their voices as well, right? Technology is creating these kind of challenges, but I believe as a technologist, that technology, we may have the answer to it also, to solve such problems like we discuss about hyper-personalization policy, terms and condition, that we are not just following what a company defined, but I should be able to select what my personalized privacy policy should look like, and then becomes a different approach to it. So there's 7 billion people. So yes, why not 7 billion policies for individuals which companies could subscribe for when they're engaging this individual personal. So it'll be interesting to see. I think the future, while it is very promising with the emerging technologies ranging from IoT, 5G, cybersecurity, autonomous technologies, I'm sure it will help to let our next generation to lead a better life. At the same time, like you said, we do need to keep tinkering over it as early as possible. is never late on the topic of privacy. Again, thanks a lot for your time.